Hey guys, Akariss here. Welcome to a brand new unit analysis video. This one is highly demanded, I feel, especially with a certain archer being released recently. So, there's actually quite a few archers to go through because I just feel like we get a lot of these in the 3 and 4 star pool. Usually freebies, as we'll see here, or we've just had them around for a very long time. These are pretty much the guys that are available at the 3 and 4 star rarity. Quite a few, actually. However, even with so many archers, believe it or not, it ends up being quite a small selection of ones that I would actually recommend for usage. However, this video may require a revisit at some point in the future because quite a few of these do not have weapon refines. So, Akariss, Gordon, Leon, Rebecca, Setsuna, and Virion. So there's actually quite a few infantry bows that do not have a weapon refine. So I totally expect that a lot of these older ones may become viable in the future. However, that does make your decision right now quite easy, and as new archers get released, like a certain someone, as of the timing of this video, it is quite easy to pick out an archer for the right choice in the job. Remember, these videos are tailored towards AR Ether raids, tier 21 up to tier 27, so high level gameplay. So right now, I definitely can recommend some pretty solid archers on how to get the job done. Mostly vantage strats, but there are some decent tanking options available. So with that being said, I'll probably cover what most of you guys may or may not have seen in my AR gameplay videos. We'll start off with Jamke, of course, and very close in comparison because I feel it's warranted. Both Jamke and Leon almost having identical stat spreads, minus a few points here or there, with Jamke overall having a few more points, but it's very negligible, so I wouldn't really worry about it. There are ways I would recommend one or the other, so we'll cover that. Keep in mind that all of these units are double blessed, meaning there are 2 mythics. For Jamke, for instance, there's 2 airs, and Leon here 2 airs, so giving them 10 HP and 10 res. So they're quite strong in terms of their overall stat spread. The best way to use these archers is obviously the close counter advantage strategy because of their really good high base attack. Both Jamke and Leon have 37 attack after a single merge. So that's 37 base attack for Leon, and Jamke reaches 37 attack because of the neutral bonus given through a merge. So they end up being fairly identical, and they both do a very good job of close counter advantaging. Consider that in light season, where I would recommend using them, you do run into flyer balls more commonly, and Yoon is a flyer as a defense mythic. So these guys naturally fit into the light season and do a good job there. I've been using Jamke for a while, and he hasn't really let me down very few times. Another advantage of both Jamke and Leon is that they have low res. Low res, as you might not think, like it may feel like it's a bad thing, but having low res means you can bait a lot of the ranged dancers quite easily because they end up having more than 5 damage. So Legendary Azura and Dancing with Kaya, just to name 2 specifically problematic dancers, end up being baitable instead of them dancing because of the low res stat. Now, between choosing these two, here's what I recommend. Look in your barracks. Do you have 11 copies of Leon right now, or maybe 10? Then probably go for Leon, because that way you do end up having a unit that may get his weapon refined before Jamke. Jamke is, he may get one, but it might take a little bit longer because he came out after. But Leon, first of all, you have the copies secured. You're not going to spend extra grails for them, and he's more likely to get his weapon refined first. So Leon, I'd recommend first. But if you don't have that many copies of Leon, and I'm talking like 2 or 3 copies, you're better off working on Jamke, especially if you haven't foddered any of his copies, because grails is far more reliable in merging up copies than relying on the gacha. And we'll touch on this topic later on in the video, because I'm sure some of you will want me to cover a brand new archer. But realistically speaking, you should be targeting a Grail unit if possible for a merge project, because you work at that pace in which you accrue and predictably know when you're going to be getting your Grails and merges to those units, so that it works up towards that. Remember, these units are at max investment, so this is the ideal build to use for them. And you know, I recommend this sort of stuff. You get the merges, you get the flowers, and go from there. If you have already Grail projects and you know Leon's, maybe you have like 5 or 6 copies, then it might be okay to consider Leon over Jamke. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to another guy who actually can kind of do both roles. Jeorge. So Jeorge is interesting because so hold on, he does have summoner support here, so he doesn't actually have 57 attack, which you may think is more attack than Jamke and Leon. The reason he has competitive attack stat between Jamke and Leon is because of the preference weapon having an additional, I believe, 2 attack or 1 attack. I don't remember exactly what it is, but the preference weapon does give him a slight edge on damage. Plus, his special refine does give him extra damage against ranged foes. So he does actually have pretty good damage. However, Jeorge does lack a little bit because everything is basically tailored towards range damage hitting him. So he does suffer a little bit when it comes to melee units going against him. With that being said, how I do recommend... It's minor weakness, not really a huge deal. But anyways, the way I see him being used is kind of like a hybrid because of the base effect on Parthia being really good. So the base effect on Parthia is damage reduction by a percentage. I believe it's 20% when range damage hits you. This is really good because you can use Jeorge either to set up Vantage really easily because you're confident he won't really die that quickly to most things, or you can use him from range and tank multiple range hits because he just has insanely good damage reduction. This means that a really high res stat isn't desirable, and he actually works pretty well in Astra as a hybrid Vantage tank unit. Now, if you combine him with Lucina, who we will be seeing more of in this video, you actually have yourself a very good unit as a partner. So if you actually look at Lucina's stat spread on the left, you see, the problem with Lucina is she's hard to merge, but if you do add merges, they go a long way because she can soak chills, very important ones too. So Lucina here on the left can actually soak every single chill from a max investment Jeorge with more merges and flowers. I've only done +1 here, but if you do have a merge Lucina, she does end up being a lot better. Of course, Corrin is a respectable support unit, so again, if you don't have Lucina, just stick with Corrin. Lucina is very useful because she does support bows, and she enables things like Noontime to go off on units like Jeorge who use Parthia with Noontime, and he gets healing every round, whereas, you know, if you use like Jamke or Leon and you try to do tank rolls, you can use Soul, but then you're not getting all these extra effects that Jeorge would have. Jeorge is probably, like, overall the most consistent archer you can invest in because of the really good effect on Parthia. Being able to tank a bunch of stuff is huge. It's why Bike has increased so well in viability, because damage reduction and, as a result, damage penetration through stuff like Legendary Alm and Black Knight is super strong on both offense and defense. Super good. Really slept on unit, I feel. Between Jamke, Leon, and Jeorge, probably Jeorge is your most flexible choice. And again, you're going to have to look through the barracks whether you truly want to invest in someone like him. Overall, really good unit. Now, with that being said, and I know plenty of people would ask me this, we do have Fallen Takumi. Now, I do have some problems recommend following Takumi. There are some problems with this. First of all, he can kind of work as like a tank unit, but that's not ideal in his usage. You want to more focus on his like splash effect, you know, like the bolt, mini bolt tower plus panic effect, which is good when set up properly, but really falters and really fails overall when there's an unsnipeable healing tower on the enemy team, or the team is fairly spread out where he can't use this properly. So if you don't get the value out of Scatty, he just ends up being weaker than all the other archer options. He'll be weaker than Leon, Jamke, and Jeorge, which is not acceptable. Keep in mind, this guy does not have a refinable weapon if you're using Scotty, so he ends up at a measly 54 HP, which is right under the Panic Manor tactics room, and you got to worry about healing tower structures on the enemy team. This is a huge detriment to Takumi. And, you know, if you have unsnipable enemy buildings on the enemy team, you're pretty much at the mercy of how the enemy has designed their base. So I cannot recommend Takumi because of that inconsistency. When he works, he works. When he doesn't, it's gonna suck. So you gotta invest in more consistent units than this. Now, this has to be said, but if you also invest in Takumi, you're pretty much losing out on 11 pieces of Fury fodder. And trust me when I say, I cannot ask to have more Fury fodder all the time. So that's also another big opportunity cost lost. Overall, not recommended. So choose one of the other guys already covered. A token shout out. I know this is a lot of people gonna love this, but here's Niles. And honestly, I think Niles ended up being really powerful because of Lucina's support capabilities. Now, Niles, you could have used them with Corrin before, but you were forced to run like Noontime, or even something else like a damage special, because Niles' one lacking factor here is that he has really low attack stat. So what you gotta do is make sure you bump up his attack as much as possible. However, his bow does occasionally give 7 extra damage through that shining effect, and it does have slaying in it, so it ends up being a really strong weapon plus the extra 2 attack. His attack ends up being significantly lower than some of the archers, but he makes up for it with all these other extra effects, plus a good speed stat and an insane res stat. Now, an insane res stat sets him up perfectly for Astra season, and a lot of people probably forget that Astra's kind of at the mercy of mages right now. So if you pull out someone like him to take care of Astra season, he'll do a good job. Lucina sets him up to use Soul, so he ends up being really indestructible to range magical damage. A lot of these builds are flexible. Don't worry about using stuff like Null Sea Disrupt if you don't have it. Like, you can always opt for other stuff too. The lull scales if you have them. Dull range is a good option. Those are all solid choices as well. Quick Repose could be subbed out for Fierce Stance if you feel like he's you know, not really winning a lot of the QR. You run into null follow-up units and you're just focusing on one-shots, for instance. Those are all considerations to be made. With that being said, I feel like Niles is solid, but maybe Jeorge can do his role a bit better. There is one thing I have to compare Niles to, and, you know, this is the appropriate time to show it, which is going to be the brand new unit, Norne. So, a lot of people look at BST and they're like, wow, this unit is so good because it has so much stats as a new unit. Now, the mathematics has been done on this, and I do predict that someone like Norne is likely to be a demoted unit, but you gotta consider, a demoted unit, especially in the 4 and 5 star pool, like if it doesn't have 3-star axes, is very uncommon actually. You are expected to spend over 2,000 orbs to 3,000 orbs to see 11 copies of a 4 and 5-star unit. This means that most people, including you, have likely not picked up 11 copies of Raisin by now, who was back at the beginning of this year. Mordecai, again, haven't probably seen 11 copies of him. There's exceptions, of course, there's some people here, especially if you've spent about that many orbs in blue or green, for instance. Especially, Raisin's actually fairly, like, he's the easier one to get. But the mathematics, the probability of getting somebody like Norne in a colorless orb is less than a focus unit on a banner, so less than 3%. And even less than 1%. It's somewhere between 0.5 to about 0.7% of seeing the unit once you go into a summoning circle. So you can't really expect for once the banner ends to get 11 copies of Norne and create a merge project that way to +10. It might be possible within a year or so, but if you consider weapon refines, new units that come through grails, and other stuff like this as the game grows, you're going to be chasing a unit that you can't properly expect to merge up. You have Niles here side by side, and this is why I wanted to choose Niles. You probably already have 11 copies of Niles or Jeorge, as shown earlier, and you can choose to upgrade these units for pretty much the same investment you would do for Norne without having to rely on getting the copies. So what do you have on the left? Just look at it. Let's say you picked up 2 Norns, maybe a month after the banner expired and that demote happened. you're looking at a unit that's inferior to a Gen 1 unit. And this is because Norne can only have 5 flowers and is unrealistic to add 9 more merges to for literally a year from now. And maybe when there's demotes that bring her to the 3-star, she'll be more of a viable option, but that doesn't even make her better than some of the units like Jeorge because of the fact that they'll get refines. And the other archers that I showed at the beginning of this video, who knows what could happen to them as you know, the game grows. So it's actually a really bad idea to invest in something like this just based on stats, because you got to consider availability and how things roll out. Look at this. Niles here is really only losing in defense and HP. And HP, you know what? The one HP point actually matters maybe for Norne in this case because of buildings probably going up to the higher level, like Panic Manor, you know, being 60 check. So there's a slight advantage there, a minor one, I'll give it that. And defense, while being nice, isn't actually that important since most teams rely on magical damage, especially in Astra season, to get off their nukes. So someone like Niles actually just has 8 more res, which is significant, way more speed, which again is significant because quick riposte checks, especially when you consider stuff like sturdy impact and mirror impact becoming a speed check, you need that speed. So 36 speed is just, it's not good. Even a max merge Norne here could potentially do less damage than Niles because of his shining effect. She will still do less damage than somebody like Jeorge because of his distant attack effect. So you see how old units don't necessarily get worse just because someone like this is released. They just end up having minor advantages over other older units. Minor at that, it's at best. So that's gonna be my section of covering Norne, but you gotta really consider yourself. Why are you looking at these new units the way you do? And look at these older ones in a better light. Use this video as a reference months from now as new units come out to basically say to yourself, wow, you know, Niles, Jeorge, Leon, Jamke, Setsuna, Rebecca, Virion, whoever comes out with some refines will end up being viable and strong in a lot of ways. Okay, and speaking of refines, and somebody who probably got a little bit forgotten about, Klein. So, Klein, while I don't really recommend him being used on offense, he is really good on defense, because having a brave bow, infantry pulse, chilled defense weapon capable defense unit is ridiculous. Okay, this is probably the nightmare scenario for you to run up against in AR defense. There are not that many units that are capable of tanking something like this. If you were able to set up a Kline with 3 infantry pulses hitting him, which isn't really that hard since his HP isn't the highest. It's pretty high, but it's not the highest. Like Soth is shown on the left here in Dark Season, providing him extra res, and Kline does have a decent res stat, means that you can set up a Glacis that hits for over 40-50 damage, a Brave effect, and the dude literally doing about 60 attack, double dipping into the effect of something like low attack defense 3 because it reduces the enemy's defense by 3. So because he has a brave bow effect, he hits twice, meaning 6 additional damage. Glacis plus mirror impact, adding 6 damage, 8 off of the mirror impact extra res effect, sturdy blow with 4. And now sturdy blow is a seal that may set a precedent for later down being mirror strike, and if mirror strike becomes a thing, then Kline ends up doing over 50-60 damage with the Glacis hit, plus the additional brave attack damage he does. So that's the sort of nightmares you can come up with if you look at some of the refines right now. A unit like Norne, no chance of doing something like this. Not even close. She doesn't even have the attack. It's all middling stats. She doesn't really do Vantage well. She kind of does tanking well, but I just showed you why someone like Niles could do it better. You just have to invest into him right now while you have the copies. Even Jeorge can do it because of his damage reduction effect, which is pretty much timeless. It will still remain strong months from now. Even, you know, a year from now. So that pretty much covers my infantry bow analysis, all units here. I know it doesn't seem like that many considering there are so many archers, but honestly these are the best that you can consider building right now. And if you're looking at your new units, look at these guys. Always reference this video and all the other analysis videos on the channel. Go check out the playlist. If a new unit comes out, you can always reference the old ones like this one to give yourself a head start on what's the best role, where to go, how to be competitive, and make the right choices. Alright guys, give the video a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.